everyone. It's Christian and Derek here from the Community Brew Shop, and tonight we are very honored to be joined by Kathy, one of the founding members and the president of the Canadian Homebrewers Association. We've got her on the channel tonight to talk a little bit about how she got her start in homebrewing, what the association does, and how it helps homebrewers, large, small, everything in between, all over this great country. So if this is your first time checking out our channel, we are the Community Brew Shop. We're a local homebrew shop based solely online, operating out of St. John, New Brunswick, and we ship across Canada, primarily focused on ingredients, but we also like to put out, we have some beer kits, we have a lot of content around recipes and brew days, and you know what, we're here to support the community, and we're really glad you could join us today. So thank you very much for being here, and Kathy, how are you doing tonight?
Very good, how are you?
Good, thank you. So I guess we'll start, we'll get the regular questions out of the way. We like to kind of make sure that we introduce people's homebrewing experience so that you can talk a little about the hobby that we all love. So I guess the simplest question is, how did you get started in homebrewing and how long have you been doing it?
So I started homebrewing in university, which is probably over a decade ago. Some friends and I wanted to start a homebrewing club at UBC in Vancouver, and none of us knew how to brew, but we wanted cheap beer. So we got that going and figured out how to brew, and got members by teaching people how to brew, and that's kind of how I got started. So okay. I've probably been brewing, I don't know, this is like 2013 or 2012. Yeah, like over, I don't know, close to a decade, close to a decade. But to be fair, I haven't really brewed too much in the last 3 years since I've had kids.
Right.
So I've definitely slowed down on the brewing. Used to make more beer now, and if I make anything, it's probably cider or mead because I can pitch the yeast and forget it. And then, right, you know, 4 months later, be like, oh yeah, I have something, I should probably check it. And then go from there.
Awesome. So when you got into brewing, you mentioned you got into it with some friends. Was it kind of an all-in thing, or did you kind of dip your toes in the water and then kind of gradually build up and expand from there? Or is this something that, you know, you did it once and you loved it, so you're, like I said, you're kind of all in on it?
So there was more resources in Vancouver at that point in time. Like there was like Dan's Homebrewing, which was a great store at that time. It's since closed. But they had a book full of recipes. You can just go in, either you're doing kind of the extract in grain way or the all grain method. And so like, I honestly didn't do all grain until like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And even then I wasn't a huge fan of it. Because it just, for me, it took too much time. And I'd been living in small spaces for a very long time. So the extract and specialty grain definitely worked for me better. And then since then, I've just kind of done more, like I said, mead and cider. So it's a lot easier, less ingredient hoarding, and less space required for that too. For
sure. So do you do, primarily, do you do your brewing inside, outside? Like what kind of gear do you have right now?
So we moved last year from Manitoba to Ontario. I'm in Belleville right now, okay, and we don't actually have a good space to put all my brewing stuff, so it's kind of stored away. But when I am brewing, it's on the stovetop. Okay. Nothing fancy. I've kind of moved away from doing 5 gallons to just 1 gallons because I don't really drink a lot, especially now, chasing 2 kids under 3. So if I'm trying something, I'm only doing a gallon batch just to kind of try it out and see if my recipe makes sense. Yeah, not a lot of space either for fermentation. So they kind of ferment like in like the bottom shelf of my bookshelves.
Right.
Right
yeah.
now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a lot of space at my place, but I have small kids as well, not quite as small as yours, but so I also have a hard time finding time to brew. We have a little bit of a less space at Derek's place, but no kids, so we kind of bounce back and forth as best we can. Yeah. Nice. So I think Derek wants to ask you about some of your favorite styles, and actually Derek's brewed a lot more mead and other things like that. I've primarily done beer, so he may have some questions about that as well. So
yeah, so I guess I have a few wrote down here, but I guess maybe I'll skip right now into the some of the stuff you do with the Canadian Homebrewers Association. Like you're still fairly active in that, although you're not brewing as much, like you said. But So what exactly like is your, I guess, day to day, or like, your role monthly in the association? So what does that include really, as far as I'm part of the club, but I don't really know exactly the inner workings of the whole, I guess, organization.
Yeah, for sure. So the Canadian Homebrewers Association was founded in 2018. It was co-founded with a friend of mine, Scott Bouchard. And so we kind of started the organization as a national nonprofit to kind of connect homebrewers across Canada. We have gone to a few homebrew conferences in the US run by the AHA. And I really want to see something like that happening in Canada, but we kind of need a national organization to kind of run a big conference like that would visit a different city every year. And there's tons of breweries across Canada and tons of great homebrewers across Canada that I really want to showcase that. And so part of what the CHA does is really kind of showcase what we're doing in Canada in terms of homebrewing. So every month we have a monthly newsletter we send out to members, kind of doing 2 to 3 stories about what's happening with homebrewers, so people can see what's happening from in the different provinces, what's happening in their area. Because sometimes you maybe in where you are, you don't have a local homebrew club, so you don't really you're not as connected to your community as much as maybe someone in a bigger city would be. So it's nice for folks in more rural areas or areas that don't have a big homebrew club to kind of see what's happening in the homebrewing community. As a member, you get access to our monthly speaker series. So every month we invite someone from the community, either a pro brewer, a home brewer, or someone from one of the brewing ingredient industries to kind of do a presentation about something relevant to home brewing. We celebrate Canadian Homebrew Day. It's the first Saturday. Oh no, I should have looked this up before. It's the first Saturday of every June. Before the pandemic started, I think this year was our second or third year running it. But the first year we ran it, we actually had kind of learn how to homebrew day, stations set up at different breweries and things like that. So we're just trying to get more involved in the community and kind of connect homebrewers across Canada. Every quarterly, we host a meeting for club presidents to meet up and chat about things about how, challenges or things that they've come across while running a homebrew club in their area. That's been great because a few months ago, a bunch of them were having issues with their PayPals, but nobody was talking to each other before that. So no one had any idea that other clubs had the same problem. So people were able to share kind of how solutions to the problem and things like that. And that was really great. And so now we do that every quarterly. And if you're involved in our local homebrew club, you're definitely welcome to send a representative to kind of join in and chat to other representatives from other clubs. Every year we also do a homebrewing conference. It is online for now, but hopefully with enough traction, we will be able to bring it to the real life in a few years or so. So it's the Canadian Homebrewing Summit. We just ran it in September. We've had 4 speakers every year so far. We're hoping to expand it and have more speakers, kind of meetups, but that's going to be something we're slowly working towards. And then something else we have been sort of working on is trying to really kind of solidify, track the homebrewing history we have in Canada. Because if you look up, if you try to read up about homebrewing in Canada, there isn't really much written, but it's been happening. It's there's been homebrewing happening throughout the years, and there's just been nobody's keeping track. No one's keeping the newsletters clubs made in the 90s or the 80s, and there's nowhere you can find those things. So we're hoping to slowly also archive all those things as much as we can find. And that's a bit slow going because you kind of have to find the people who may have it, and people may not be keeping newsletters from the 80s or 90s. And, before the 2000s, people didn't have cell phones or cameras handy.
We take it for granted now, right? It's just, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, I'm asking people for photos, oh, do you have a photo of your brewing setup when you're brewing decades ago? They're like, no. Why would we have photos of it?
we might be able to help you out there. Derek and I have a few contacts at Moosehead Breweries out here on the East Coast, and you may or may not know it's Canada's oldest independent brewery. And since they launched a small batch component to the brewery a few years ago, they've really been kind of bringing up some of their history about how the company started, basically in this woman's kitchen, 200 years ago or 150 years ago, right? So we have a few contacts there, so we may be able to hook you up with some old photos and stuff like that for sure. So
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about trying to bring people together. That was a couple of my questions. How can you help? Like, we struggle with this a little bit too. Like, we have in St. John, we have a pretty good customer base and just in the surrounding area, but we also have Grand Manan Island, which you have to take a ferry to get across. And we're trying to expand our reach and not necessarily as a business, but we know there's people brewing out there because they're buying grain off us, but they don't really know, they're not really connected to the community because they're so far off the grid. So I like some of your points you brought up there about trying to bring people together. And we struggle with that here, even in St. John, with our, kind of local people that we deal with. And still now we've been around for about a year with the brew shop, but it's been hard to get our reach out because, you don't find out till someone for 10 years that they've been homebrewing their whole life. And then, they give you recipes and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty neat to see that you guys are bringing, all that stuff together. So I guess one of my other questions before we go on to something else was, and you were talking about there's not a lot of information about, homebrewing in Canada, that kind of thing. And really, I find there's not a bunch of information on brewing in Canada, not only at home, but even on a, craft brew scale or something like that.
Totally.
Smaller microbreweries. It's pretty, there's a couple books out there that I've looked for, but there's not a whole lot on that. But what style would you say, for beer would be considered the most Canadian beer? Not Molson Canadian, but if you're gonna brew a proud Canadian beer, what style would you think that would be if you're doing it at home?
Honestly, I feel like any beer that has spruce tips in it.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
maple syrup. But
Yeah.
I think spruce tips would be a really good kind of representation of Canada in a beer.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, one of our beer kits has molasses in it, and we kind of feel the same way too. It's is there any other place where you're just throwing, sticky sugar in just to kind of see what happens, right? So, for sure. You got anything else, Derek? You want to move on to something else?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay.
I'll take
I guess since you brought up the Canadian Homebrew Day, and we actually tried to do something for our first Canadian Homebrew Day after we had opened the store. So as Derek mentioned, we've been open for about a year, and we opened in the middle of a pandemic just because, our local shop had closed down due to some health reasons with the owner. And we decided it was time to kind of take matters into our own hands. Of course, it was just happened to be the first, I guess, September or October after kind of we started to see lockdowns and shutdowns and everything. And by the spring, we had started to gain some traction just because there had been some people who picked up the hobby because of the lockdowns and everything. And then we'd also started to make contact with some of the customers at the old shop that we had been using before he closed down. So we wanted to do something around a customer appreciation, learn to brew. We had some plans for a collaboration with one of the local coffee shops, do a coffee porter or something, or coffee stout. But of course, right around the time the homebrewing day came up, New Brunswick was under some pretty severe lockdowns and we weren't able to do anything. So with your mandate to, I guess, kind of bring brewers together and share information, how has the pandemic and trying to manage all the different lockdowns and restrictions across all the different provinces, how's that affected your work with the association?
So honestly, when we started, most of our things were online. So our board we have 9 members on our board of directors, and 7 of them are regional reps. So we have kind of someone in charge, kind of from each region, kind of representing homebrewers from that region. So we would be updated about what's happening with the pandemic, or what's happening locally with homebrewers, or if there's any new competitions happening or club activity. That's kind of how we are able to know what's happening across Canada.
We're all busy, don't worry about it.
So we had been doing things online because we're all spread out, and we don't really have a building where the CHA lives, right? And so the pandemic didn't really impact us too much. We were hoping to move more in person in our second year onwards, and that's kind of when the pandemic started. And so we just kind of kept what we were doing with the online things. With Canada, like Canadian Homebrew Day, having it online definitely, I feel like, minimize participation, because it's kind of people, it's kind of hard brewing along on Zoom. It's not as fun. It's not as great. So, the participation, I feel like, was definitely lower. But, the pandemic's going to end eventually. People are going to get vaccinated, and, things are going to open back up. I feel like hopefully next year will be the year that we can do things in person again, right?
For sure. And do you plan like the annual conference and things like that? So kind of the end game is to have that, I think you mentioned, in like a rotating city and things like that, and have it really in person, bring some cool guests in and some homebrewers and stuff. That's okay. Yeah.
Yes, that is the plan. It is very challenging though, right? Because, any of the major cities like Vancouver, Toronto, right? If you want to do a conference there, it's super expensive, but that's kind of where the majority of your homebrewers are. So then we're kind of trying to figure out like what is a, slightly further away city that's a bit cheaper to host things, that has enough of a population of homebrewers, but also close enough that the big city homebrewers would be willing to travel to it, and kind of having a happy medium, and also have like breweries in the region and things to see, right?
Right.
Because I imagine like if people are going out to a homebrewing conference, like besides going to the seminars, you also want to like meet other homebrewers and also check out the brewing scene in that area. And it's kind of like a great chance for you to like make a trip out to somewhere new if you've never been there before.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So your regional reps, are they just like local homebrewers that have kind of decided to kind of put their foot forward and extend a hand and get involved? And what are their kind of day-to-day, or as Derek mentioned, month-to-month responsibilities with the association?
Yeah, so we have a monthly board meeting. And so they kind of chat with, sometimes they connect with their local homebrew clubs, either in person, or if their clubs are running in-person meetings, or through Facebook groups. So people are aware of like kind of their region's Facebook groups. And so if there's things like, for the last homebrewing conference we had, our reps were kind of like, sending messages out to people, just reminding people that it's happening. I think last year we did a open homebrewers survey, and that like our regional reps definitely helped us with that. And so regional reps kind of during the board meetings, they're also helping like brainstorming ideas, coming up, reaching out to people about potential speakers, just kind of letting us know what's happening in the region, I guess. I think that's kind of their main jobs, I guess, as like the regional reps.
Right. It's always going to be that challenge for Canada. We're such a big country and not a lot of, dense population centers. So it's what might be happening out here on the East Coast could be vastly different from what's happening on the West Coast, or, up north or something, even though we're all kind of doing the same thing. Right. So.
Totally.
Yeah,
and the access to shops and things like that are different across like Canada as well. Right. Whether you're city, rural, or, you're living on an island. Right. So like it's vastly different for sure.
Yeah, we were very fortunate. We started, even though we started during the pandemic, we made the conscious decision to start online and focus on ingredients. So we didn't have a lot of overhead with equipment and stuff like that. But it's been tough out here. There's been a number of stores that have closed because of, various lockdowns in cities and reduced foot traffic and things like that. And for businesses maybe that weren't prepared to make that shift online and stuff, I mean, it's really tragic. And, it's definitely lessens the community, right? When there's less shops around, less access to the hobby and things like that. So, yeah.
Totally. And we've been seeing the trend of like, brick and mortar shops closing across Canada.
Right. Yeah,
because
it's certainly
a lot
not
of
just
people are
limited
going
to the
online, right?
Yeah, it's not limited to the homebrew, and then we're such a niche kind of community as it is anyway, right? So it makes it pretty tough. So I'll just ask one more question before I pass it back to Derek. And I meant to ask it earlier, but we got talking about the pandemic and stuff like that. So what are you seeing as far as trends on as homebrewers go, right? Like yourself, you've made the switch more to the the mead and different things that are kind of the fire and forget. Are you seeing like the trendy IPAs and kind of those flavored beers that are making the rounds in the craft breweries? Are you seeing that filter down to the home brewers, or are people still making the same, stout and porter they've been making for 10 years because that's what works for them? Like, what do you see from your membership?
Honestly, just because like as diverse as beers are, like homebrewers are just as diverse and their palates are just as diverse. So honestly, like they're just kind of making whatever they want to make.
Sure, that's a good point.
Yeah, like there's going to be people who are trend chasers and are going to be making, the pastry stouts and things like that. And there's going to be people who are like, nope, I like my IPA and I'm going to keep making it. I'm not even going to try the new age hops. I'm just going to use my, Cascade and like Chinook, and that's all I'm going to use.
Yep, for sure. Then grow it in the backyard. It's always worked for them. Why not?
Exactly.
Right?
I don't have to leave my house to get hops, and that's all I'm going to make.
Exactly.
So I think it's diverse. I don't think there really is too much of a trend, and that's not really something we really ask our members, but that is maybe something I should ask my members. Ask them what kind of styles they're making, because that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, in our short time that we've been in business, we've definitely seen some trends. Not so much among more experienced brewers that we've brought on as customers. Like we get some ingredients that people are very clearly making stouts or reds, different more traditional styles like that. But a lot of the newer brewers that either take our loaner gear out for the weekend and take it for a spin, or they're just starting to get into the hobby. Like it's IPA all the time, and that's also, New Brunswick is very brewery dense. There's a lot of microbreweries out here, and the IPA trend is in full effect out here. So we're definitely seeing it in our own small little microcosm. We're definitely seeing the IPA trend. So I just thought I would be amiss if I didn't pick your brain on the more national scale, if everyone's seeing it, right? So yeah. All right, Derek, what do you got?
Yeah, well, just to your point there, I find here in like New Brunswick, especially where it's a small province, we're a little bit behind the trend. So you don't see things like pastry stouts out here, that kind of thing yet. So I think the IPA trend is still here. I think it's here to stay for the most part. And you see that at most of the breweries, but I think it's, as far as those things with homebrewers as well, you don't see a lot of people migrating into it because we're just kind of catching on to those trends. Mm-hmm. Same with fashion and everything else out here. It's always like 4 or 5 years behind. Like people are just catching on to Crocs now, I think, out here. I don't know. No, that ship sailed, thankfully. Yeah, so you talked a little bit, Kathy, about some of the homebrew clubs in some areas. Again, in New Brunswick, it's very small and dispersed, so it's hard to actually get these homebrew clubs going because. And the other thing is too, I guess Christian and I noticed a lot of our customers aren't really connected well online. Like we'll get orders from people that are like, they call us on the phone and they're like, yeah, I don't want to use the internet, or I just want to get my grain, here's a text, and then we send them the grain and they email transfer us or whatever it is. But they don't do anything on Facebook or anything like that. But what are some of the challenges, I guess, that you've seen across Canada for starting these homebrew clubs? I guess the rural thing would be a big thing, but any other challenges you see? Because I think people kind of have a misconception where you can just, I'm going to start a homebrew club and that's it. But I think there's more to it, like insurance and all that stuff, right?
So honestly, like you don't really have to think about insurance until you get bigger, right? I mean, you can always start small. It could just be in your garage and you're meeting your buddies and your buddy brings a friend, right? And it grows naturally that way. I think the challenge with starting a homebrew club, wherever you are, is that, you've seen some of the bigger homebrew clubs, they're doing like educational seminars every month at their meetings. They're doing like off-liver training, and they're bringing in guests from like far away to come do a presentation and things like that. That takes time to build up to. And it's okay if you're not there yet. And especially if you're starting anything new in your community, it's going to be a while before people take to it and change their routine and think about, every third Wednesday or, third Wednesday of the month is like my homebrew club meeting and I should go and hang out, right? It takes a while to change people's habits. So if you're starting a homebrew club in your area, don't be discouraged. Just keep making it available, keep doing it. And I know a lot of these homebrew clubs kind of just start as like a beer swap thing where people bring their homebrews and they talk about it or may not talk about it and just end up just drinking for the evening. And that it takes a while too to kind of move on to the next step. And you can be the person, if your homebrew club is that drinking club, you can be the person and be like, what, I want to talk about IPAs next month. And like, I'm sure people will let you talk about it. Generally people who don't like, the people who are there, they would probably like to listen to it, but it does take some effort to create presentations and things like that. So if you want to see it happen, you might have to be the person to do it. And then you can slowly kind of add more structure as things go along. I know that I've talked to some club presidents of smaller clubs where they're a bit frustrated because, the nice thing about clubs is that you can organize big grain buys and hop buys, and you save a lot of money doing that. But if you're a really small club and you only have 15 people, not all of them might want to do that. So it might not be worth the effort to run it. In cases like that, you can always partner with a nearby smaller homebrew club as well, and then split it if you have a nearby homebrew club that's close by, right? To kind of add numbers to your bulk buy.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we've been dealing with some customers in Newfoundland recently, and they were having some issues with, obviously shipping costs there when you're shipping across, the high seas. Like it does get quite costly. So that's a great piece of information that we could probably share with them, just to say, if you can do bulk buys with some other home brewers, if you can organize a little bit better and that kind of thing. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's almost like with when starting a club, I wanted to ask about, kind of tips for starting a club, but it almost sounds like from your conversation there that you're just like, if you're going to do it, just do it, put yourself out there, take the initiative. And because, we all have our own recipes and we all have our own gear and we all have our own way of doing things. But at the end of the day, like it just takes maybe that one person to kind of add a little bit of organization to it. And to your point, it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be, it's not like you have to have t-shirts or business cards in your second meeting, right? Like just start it.
I mean, you can order t-shirts right off the get-go if you want to, and just like be matching for like every month, once a month. That's great.
Yeah.
You just have to go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't think I had really any other questions. I think you covered most of the stuff I had written down anyways, but I don't know. Do you have anything else, Christian, that you...
I think we'll just maybe close on, what do you see the plans for the Homebrewers Association? Like pandemic aside, how do you plan to continue to support homebrewers in Canada? And I guess give us your pitch on why, homebrewers should, pay their membership and join up and spread the word.
So eventually, I would love, the end goal is to also help push for legislation change across Canada, so that homebrew can be served at festivals. It's less restrictive across the board. Like in Quebec, you still can't even transport homebrew. So it can't leave your house. So if you're trying to take it to get judged for a competition, that's technically illegal. So it's quite restrictive in a lot of places still. And I really want to see the CHA be used as a platform to help push for legislative change. We just kind of have to be kind of a bit around a bit longer, establish ourselves a bit more to be able to push for change like that. Our membership is $20 per year, and so you have access to a monthly speaker series. It covers a wide variety of topics for brewing beer, making cider, and mead. And you get to hear basically Canadian homebrewers and brewers talk about things that they're passionate about. And I think it's super important that we highlight Canadian brewers and homebrewers, because we have tons of great people with great ideas, great techniques. We just need to kind of showcase them, right? So we have great brewers here, and I really want to highlight that and showcase that. Or even we have great brewing ingredients, like growers and people who are involved in the malting industry that I want to hear from and showcase. We have tons of great things happening in Canada. The CHA, we really want to kind of make the homebrewing community in Canada much smaller. I really want everyone to meet each other in person, and be I talked to this person from across the country, and we see each other once a year at the Canadian Homebrewing Summit. I really want people to have that. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it's that classic conundrum for us Canadians, that we're all so humble that we never want to kind of talk up our own stories, right? But there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot to be proud of. And Derek and I both agree that what you're doing with the association and what the members of the association are doing, your board members and your regional members, we think it's important, and we support you as a shop, and we're very proud to do so, and we really can't thank you enough for all your hard work. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and we'll put the bid in when you guys start doing the the traveling conferences to come to St. John. We'll figure out a place for you to camp out, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Let us know when you're ready.
Yeah.
sounds
And if
good.
It'll be like the
somewhere else, we'll
Olympics,
probably
yeah.
find a way to get there for sure. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So thanks, everybody. This has been Christian and Derek from the Community Brew Shop with Kathy, the president and one of the co-founders of the Canadian Homebrewers Association. The Community Brew Shop is a small local homebrew shop based out of St. John, New Brunswick, but we do ship nationwide. You can get us at communitybrewshop.ca, and of course, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. We're always happy to chat, share recipes, content, and you can find us on our YouTube channel. We've got lots more interviews like this. Kathy, where can people reach out to find the Canadian Homebrewers Association, whether it's more information or learn how to sign up?
So our website is canadahomebrews.ca, and we're on social media at Canada Homebrews.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much for chatting with us tonight. And if you have more questions, please make sure you reach out to Kathy or ourselves at the shop, and we'll be sure to put you in touch. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Cheers.
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.